And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. So I actually gave a talk which was literally, where do black people come from? Someone asked me that question before. So I had something like almost 100 slides on the topic. We'll see if that can even be worked in on the post-production side, but we can just discuss the topic. So what we did is we looked at the oldest creation stories known to human beings, and we found those written down in classical Kemet. So for example, in different locales, you have all of these creation stories where they basically give you different perspectives on the exact same thing. So I'll start with that of Men Nefer. Now, why am I doing that? Because this was the very first capital of classical Kemet. When Narmer founded Kemet, Heru Narmer founded Kemet, he did so at Men Nefer. And at that time, the major divinity was called Ptah. So and you can find this on what's now called the Shabaka stone. For those who want to do their own research, you can read the Shabaka stone. And on that text, you can find written in Medu Neter where it talks about the role of Ptah. In Ptah's form as both Ptah Nun and Ptah Naunet, this is the masculine and feminine sides of what they refer to as the primordial waters. They say in the beginning was nothing but infinite water. And using Jehuti, which represented thought, and then Heru, which represented the heart, and then you have the eloquence of the tongue, that all of those different components came together with the idea of Sia, Hu, and Heka. So Sia, this represents that which is divine insight, right? That's Sia. Hu is referred to as authoritative utterance, and then Heka, sometimes they translate that as quote-unquote magic, but literally it is the power to bring things into being. So using those elements of Sia, Hu, and Heka, who themselves were represented as divine forces, this is how Ptah brought all things into being, from the thought of the heart coming out through the tongue, through that divine utterance, and then that bring everything into being. So all other creation stories that talk about in the beginning was the word, or they talk about the role of the word, is actually coming from that specific creation story that talks about the role of the tongue and the word and so forth and so on. And this is why they refer to the language as Medu Neter, which is divine words, because the idea is that everything that exists in reality is nothing but a word that is spoken, a continuation of that original word. Everything is that has now been transformed into its current form, ultimately coming from Ptah. So that's the Men Nefer creation story, just in summary. And if you want more details on any of them, I can go deeper into them. But I want to give you I'll give you four creation stories from classical Kemet. Now we'll turn to the Khumnu creation story. That's what the Greeks refer to as Hermopolis, for, again, those who want to search for it themselves. So in the Khumnu creation story, that goes into the attributes before creation came into being. And the idea was, in the beginning, you had Amen and Amenet. So Amen is masculine hiddenness, and then Amenet is feminine hiddenness. This means in the beginning, before anything came into being, everything was hidden. Then you had Nun and Naunet, that everything was wet. So again, Nun is masculine wetness, and then Naunet is feminine wetness. So you have those attributes. Then you have Ke and Keket. This is darkness, masculine and feminine darkness. And then you have He and Hehet, which is masculine and feminine infiniteness. Now, basically, what is this telling you? What it's telling you is that if you understand creation, then you understand procreation. And if you understand procreation, then you understand creation, because it's a metaphor for procreation, because it's giving you the attributes of the womb. The female womb has all of those different attributes: hidden, dark, wet, so forth and so on. And then from that, this is how creation comes into being. So this is the core of the Khumnu creation story. And what it really emphasizes is the necessity of male and female attributes in order to create life. So from there, that's where creation took shape, from the original 8 Neteru. And you have when you came to Abibitumi headquarters, you notice that it's an 8-sided structure. And we call Abibitumi headquarters Khumnu, the place of the 8. There are 8 pillars that hold the structure up. Everything there has 8, 8, 8, 8, and it's referring to the original Khumnu creation story, and that's the significance of that. Now, and this is coming from around 2600 BCE to 2500 BCE. So the Men Nefer creation story is going back, let's say, at the very least 5,400 years ago. That's on short chronology, going to the time of Heru Narmer, the founding of Kemet, this is the original creation story. That's around 5,400 years ago. Now we've come to around 4,600 years ago. Now we're going to come to the Ilnu creation story. This is what the Greeks call Heliopolis. Now, Heliopolis is a place that's now inside of modern Cairo, and the only thing that's left of it is one single techen, which is what they call an obelisk nowadays from the Greek term. But at Ilnu, they would talk about, and this is probably one of the most famous creation stories of classical Kemet, that in the beginning was again this infinite wetness, right, referred to as Nun. But then from inside of Nun, you had Neberger, which is an appellation rather of Atum. Now, Atum represents the sun at sunset, and it comes from the root word tum, which is to cease, to end, to bring to completion. And Atum represents the sun, again, at sunset. So that people will say, well, why aren't you starting at sunrise? You're starting at sunset because the end is the beginning, and the beginning is the end. So the end of the day is really where the beginning of the new day, starts. So from that idea, you have in the beginning Atum. From Atum came Shu and Tefnut, Shu representing air, and then Tefnut representing moisture. And then from there you have Geb and Nut, Geb representing earth, and then you have Nut representing the sky and all fiery things inside of the sky, including the sun, the stars, and so forth and so on. So when you see her depicted, you'll see all of these fiery elements. So what do you have? You have air, you have water, you have earth, and then you have fire, right? And you find other creation stories like that of the Bambara, which we'll get to, that have those four elements inside of them as well. But then from those, four that came out from Atum, then you have Asar, Aset, Setech, and Nebet-Hut. Asar representing, so those first four elements represent like the natural world, you understand? And for us as black people, we could look at, wind power, solar power, so forth. Everything comes from there. But now we come into the social world. So Asar represents rulership. Aset represents both motherhood, but then the foundation of rulership, because her name is written with a throne. And the idea in classical Kemet is no male can be a ruler unless he's connected to a female who's in the royal bloodline, similar to what you'll find in quote-unquote matrilineal societies to this very day. And then you have Setech, which represents military might, and then Nebet-Hut, which represents the female ruler of the enclosure. So when we say Nebet-Hut, and again, this refers to protection on the feminine aspect. Again, male, female, because it's the complementary that bring creation into being. And then in the form, and this is Atum, in his form of Khepra, this is the scarab, what they call the dung beetle, rolling the solar, disc inside of the solar boat into the sky. All of this came out of Nun, and then, creation came into being as well on that first primordial mound. You have the idea of the primordial mound inside of the infinite wetness and the Men Nefer creation story as well. I don't think I mentioned that as well. And then you have that of Waset, what they now call Luxor, or what the Greeks referred to as Thebes. So in Waset, it kind of ties into the Khumnu creation story, because you remember that in the Khumnu creation story, there was Amen and Amenet. Now, what you find that's unique about the Waset creation story is that because Amen is that which is hidden, they say that Amen is inside of every single other divinity that you're talking about. So if you want to say Atum, Amen is hidden inside of Atum. If you want to say Ptah is great, well, Amun is also hidden inside of Ptah. So no matter what divinity, and you find this, Amen coming into prominence in what they refer to as the so-called Middle Kingdom. So this is where you now find Amen. All the other creation stories are still there, but Amen is referred to as Nesut Necheru, which is the king of all the Necheru, the divinities.